Okay. Can you hear and see me? I have to check every morning because it's
Yeah,
very
we can hear you.
complex. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I remember you have a test on Monday, so about a quarter to 8, I'll publish it. It's 19 questions, and you have 20 minutes, which means it's just a shade over a minute for each question. I think that's more or less the standard. Also, those of you who have submitted the bonus questions, or the bonus point questions on the ship of slaves, I have graded them, and over the weekend I'll send you what you got. These are extra points which will be added into your final grade. Not attached to, but will be added into. For instance, for example, if you got a 60, I can't. If you do a test and you got a 60, and you got all 7 of these questions right, then that 60 turns into a 67. You can only use it once. So they were pretty good, except the last one, there was some problem. That's where I've seen most of the problems anyway. Is that the question was in 1807, Great Britain stopped the transportation or exportation of slaves. What year did the United States stop? Officially stop. I blackened that word, I underlined it and everything. I highlighted it, and the answer is 1808. Remember, when he was talking, he says England stopped importing slaves, and America officially did in 1 year later. He doesn't say 1808, but he says 1 year later. And then he says, slaves were continually smuggled in. Now, that's not official. Official was 1808 up until 1862. So a lot of you put 1862 for some reason. That's when they were smuggled in. So you lose 1 point. Still, a lot of you got 6 points. Some of you actually picked that up and got the full 7 points. So I will, over the weekend, I will email each and every one of you who have gotten, who have done the extra, the bonus points, what you actually got. All right? Did I lose you? Can you still see and hear me?
Yeah, you're there.
Okay, because something just flashed on my screen. Okay. If you can hear and see me, that's fine. Okay, so let's just take on your worksheet. We should. We did get up to number 11. So we have the first page done. We looked at Lexington and Concord. We know if you look at number 2 on your worksheet, that's the answer for number 1. It's kind of a those one. But we know that the Second Continental Congress, acting as a central government or a national government, their main purpose during the war for independence was to raise and supply an army, which was very hard for them to do since they couldn't compel the states to contribute to the war. And we went over why George Washington was elected commander-in-chief. We looked at the Olive Branch petition. We looked at common sense, Thomas Paine's article in Common Sense. And we all know who wrote the Declaration of Independence, right? You should all know that. So that's America's most famous document. Matter of fact, the Declaration of Independence, there was a lot of nations after that. Even in the 1960s, 1950s, 1960s in Vietnam, the leader of North Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, he wrote a declaration of the people. It's called the Declaration of the Peoples of Vietnam, and he almost verbatimly writes what Thomas Jefferson wrote. So a lot of people, a lot of nations writing their declarations of independence actually copied a lot from Thomas Jefferson, which tells you the magnitude of this document, Declaration of Independence. And we know when they discussed the Declaration of Independence, debated it, the big issue that they had to eliminate from the Declaration of Independence was the issue of slavery. So if you read the Declaration of Independence, you see nothing in there about slavery. It was there, but it had to be deleted. We also know about the Declaration of Independence that it was an attack against the King of England, George III, not Parliament. Parliament's not even mentioned. And they were the chief antagonists of the colonists all the way up until the War for Independence. The first victory, the victory that built the morale of the Continental Army and the morale of the colonists happened right here in this state. As you know, was Trenton, New Jersey. Hey, for Trenton. Saratoga was the turning point. And why was Saratoga so important? We went over the Treaty of Paris, and now we are looking at the Articles of Confederation. I think we went over the Articles of Confederation, and I was about to talk about the good things about the Articles of Confederation, but we know that there's a lot of problems with the Articles of Confederation. And I put them up because one can understand this. Because as this nation is growing, especially as people are now moving across the Appalachian Mountains and moving up into the Ohio, up into the Great Lakes and out to the Mississippi, there's a cry for a national government, because we know that the Native Americans, after the War for Independence and after England leaves, they did not take to this new government. They didn't call it their own. So there was a lot of, we know that the Articles of Confederation, even though they granted some powers to this new government, there was also a lot of weaknesses. We know that they could declare war, they can develop foreign policy, they can coin money, they can regulate Native American affairs, they can run the post office. Matter of fact, the first postmaster general was Benjamin Franklin. They could borrow money. That's the key. And they can appoint officers and officers to the Army and Navy, but it does not say that they can raise an army. So there's a lot of weaknesses here. Again, could not tax, could not regulate interstate or foreign trade, had no authority to raise an army of its own. But let's take a look at some of the good things, or achievements of this new government. The achievements of the Confederation Congress. All right, two things we're going to look at. Now, despite its political and economic shortcomings, the Confederation Congress achieved some very notable successes, especially in the administration of the Western lands. Now, did this, I'm trying, and I'm gonna, matter of fact, I'm going to see somebody over the weekend on how I can take resources from somewhere else, because I want you to look at maps, to see what some of the problems are especially with the boundaries between the states, and I'm gonna see if I can kind of transfer them over, so I can put them on and you can look at them now.
Professor, real quick, I have a quick question on B, on the last slide. On the last slide, the weaknesses, in addition to could not tax.
They could not tax.
Right, no, I have that. What else was it? I missed it in my notes.
It should be on the,
It was on the last, yeah, it was on the last slide. Okay. All right, so this is posted? Yep.
yeah, it could not tax, could not regulate, could not tax.
I don't see the PowerPoint in Canvas.
You don't see the PowerPoint? Hold on. Maybe that's one.
No, we see it now.
Oh,
We see it on the screen. We don't see it posted in Canvas. What you're showing is what she said, right?
yes, it's in file. If you go to the files, this whole thing is in the files. But you can look at it from here, because there's the weaknesses. But if you notice, three of the things that they're weak in is collecting money. No taxes, no regulation of interstate commerce, because that deals with money, and no foreign trade. There was no tariffs in place that they could collect money. So, and then the last one is raising on the Army and Navy. All right, let's take a, like I said, there were some achievements, notable achievements of the Confederation Congress, but it was mostly in the Western lands. That would be the Appalachian Mountains out into the Great Lakes and out into the Mississippi. And the first one was the Ordinance of 1785. 1785. Now this this is what I'm going to try and get the maps and show you exactly what happens here. But if you look at, say this is Pennsylvania, okay, this is PA, and this is Ohio. Right. So we're going to take this section, we're going to put it into a grid, okay, a grid. Take a look at this, a grid. Each one of these grids is a township. Now just remember that. Okay, here's a township. Let me go back. All right. They surveyed this section of Ohio, and it creates the survey established townships of 6 square miles. So if you take one of these townships and each one is 6 square miles, right? Each one of those townships. Don't forget, there's a lot of townships. This is the way they were cutting up the land. Now, so they have 6 townships. Each, a township is 6 square miles, and it's divided, and they divide them into 32 sections of 648. So that's 648. Okay? That's looking at this township. Each section was divided into half sections of 320. So they cut this in half. This would be 320. Now you have 2 halves, okay? And then the divided that into sections of 160 acres. So now you have 160 acres. Their reasoning here was that a family of 4 could live very independently on a 160-acre farm. So now they said, okay, 160 acres, 160 acres, 168, 160 acres. So they say, okay, a family of 4 now could live independently on 160 acres. All right. And so they opened up the land. They opened up the land. Now, one of these 36 sections, so you're going to take one of these, and they're going to set it aside for a church, school, meeting places, maybe the local government or whatever they want to do with it. So one would be set aside. And this is the way they divided the land. The next ordinance, and this opened the land for more and more people to come out into into this wilderness, the frontier, the backcountry, whatever you want to call it. Well, the next thing they did, they come up with another ordinance called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. 1787. Again, there's no constitution, so 1787. They're working on it. This ordinance established the Northwest Territory. Eventually, this territory would become Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So this is a huge area. A huge area. Now, it outlined the process by which almost all territories would become states. So what this ordinance is going to do, it's going to set up the framework on how a territory would become a state. And this is what they proposed. When a territory was organized, and maybe it's the territory of Ohio, in Wisconsin or Michigan, whatever it is. When this territory is organized, Congress would first appoint a territorial governor and a judge. So this is Indiana, so you could have a governor and you would have a judge. Okay. Congress appoints this. When 5,000 adult males live in the territory, so that's 5,000 notice, adult males. 5,000 live in the territory. A territorial legislature was elected and a temporary constitution be written. So they got 5,000 adult males. They said, okay, we got 5,000 adult males, so we're going to create a legislature, and a temporary legislature, and we're going to create a temporary constitution. That's the next step. When the total population reaches 60,000, now, adult, this takes in everybody, 60,000 people, total people. So that would be men, women, and children. Men, women, and children. A state constitution would be prepared, and the territorial residents would then petition Congress for admission to the Union as a state. Okay, so you have 60,000 people living in Indiana. Okay, they're in Indiana. So they go through the process. Now they come up to 60,000 and they write a permanent constitution. They petition Congress for admission into as a state. Now this is interesting here because when was the last two states added to the United States? I was alive. I was alive during this. So when was the last two states? See, this is what makes it sad about this remote stuff, because you can't actually discuss this, because we could have a little fun with this. But when were the last two states that were entered into the United States? Well, believe it or not, it was 1959. Like I said, I was alive. I was 1 year old. Can you believe that? 1959. And the last two states, obviously, were Alaska and then Hawaii. There's some talk about making Puerto Rico the 51st Street, but I don't know about that. I know this, every time that becomes a question in a ballot in Puerto Rico, whether you want to stay the same as a Commonwealth of the United States, or as a free and independent nation, or a state, it seems like everything always stays the same. Plus two, where would you put the star? The flag would be kind of asymmetrical. Where do you put that star? That's kind of funny. Okay, now the big thing and the most important thing about the Northwest Ordinance in establishing all these territories is that slavery is prohibited. No slavery in these territories. There's no slavery in these territories. And I think that's the biggest thing, because slavery does not make it to Indiana or Illinois or Wisconsin or Ohio or Michigan. So that presents a problem. It's not a problem. No slavery. So it's prohibited. All right, let's take a look now what's going on in the frontier. Let's take a look at what's going on in the frontier. Things aren't hunky-dory, you might say. The Northwest Ordinance pledged that Native American land and property would not be taken without their consent. I mean, we've seen, well, they don't have, not to you, but growing up through the 50s and 60s and 70s, there were a lot of these Western movies, John Wayne, Randolph Scott, all these Western movies, and the Indians were always, the Native Americans were always got the more into the deal, and all these Native cowboy and Indian movies. So we know that they don't do very well. Matter of fact, the treaties by which the United States acquired Indian lands was mostly negotiated under do it rest. I mean, they sit down the chief, put a gun to his head and say, here, sign here, sign here. All right, you just gave us Indiana. Got it. Indiana is now part of the United States. This is all our territory. Most of the tribes repudiated the treaties. They didn't believe in the treaties. They weren't going to follow the treaties. And there was open resistance to the expansion of territory. Now, just think about that. The Native Americans did not want the settlers into their land. You got the Articles of Confederation obviously cannot protect these people moving into this Western territory. So something has to be done. The inability of the Confederation Congress to maintain peace on the frontier added for a call by these people who are moving out there, these settlers. They're saying to this government, listen, you gotta do something. We're being attacked, our farms are being burnt down. Come on, government, you gotta do something. So there's a call now for a stronger national government. Do something. You do something. All right. Conflict. Let's look at the conflicts on the frontier. There's send armies out there. Militia. Well, actually, George Washington takes office, so it's kind of like jumping a little ahead because now we have a constitution when George Washington becomes president. So he takes office. And there's ongoing conflict between the Native Americans in the Ohio Valley. And white settlers demanded a solution. George, come on, George, do something. Come on, help us out. So George Washington then sends an army out, military expeditions. Sends them out against the Native American Confederation. It's called the Miami Confederation. They're not from Florida, but the Miami Confederation. And this is an alliance of 8 Western tribes. So in 1790 and 1791, George Washington sends 2 expeditions out into the territory. And it's a disaster. They get their butts kicked all over the place by this confederation. So George Washington now is determined to put an end to this conflict. So now he gets a veteran commander or general to lead 2,000, an army of 2,000 out into the territory, and this general, his name is Anthony Wayne. He is often referred to as Mad Anthony Wayne. But he's a veteran of the American Revolution, and he defeats the Native Americans at the Battle of Falling Timber in August of 1794. They enter into a peace treaty. It's called the Treaty of Greenville. And, 12 of the Western tribes yield almost all of present-day Ohio and parts of Indiana to this new government. So, Native Americans are defeated. They sign a treaty. They give up their lands, and for the next 20 years, there's basically peace in the Northwest Territory. Relationships with the Native Americans in the Northeast. Northeast would be the Carolinas and Georgia. George Washington is more successful in negotiating treaties with the Cherokee, the Creek, and the Choctaw. It does not resort to war. Matter of fact, it's these tribes, especially in Georgia and South Carolina, that try to assimilate themselves into this new government. They leave the teepees behind. They dress like ordinary colonial men and women. They get education. They even some of them will even go to law school. And they try to accept this new government and, again, assimilate themselves into this society. When we get to Andy Jackson, we're going to see that he's going to take all these people and move them west. They refer to it as the Trail of Tears. So, there's peace in the southeast, and now there's basically peace in the Northwest Territory. All right, let's take a look at some of the finances and another rebellion. It's the first rebellion, or the first uprising in George Washington's administration. He has to deal with. With the end of war, the United States is in debt to the tune of $160 million. I mean, that could be billions, maybe even trillions today. As a matter of fact, we are in debt in the trillions. Probably never get out of it. To meet the need for a national currency, Congress printed paper money. This new government printed paper money. But each state printed their own money. So now when you have too much money out there, what happens? What do they call that? They call that a recession. A lot of money out there. So money now is basically devalued. More money was printed than the value of loans. So they borrow money, and now they're printing more money, and it's paper money. Nobody wanted paper money. They want hard cash. So this creates an inflation. Big inflation. Now, the problem of paying off its debts plagued this new nation. Army officers, even who fought in the War for Independence, threatened to mutiny unless they were given back pay. Army officers weren't being paid. Created another problem, internal arrest. Inflation was also a serious problem for the states, again, which printed their own money. There's no regulation on who can print money. High taxes, along with the refusal of creditors to accept paper money. See, nobody wanted paper money because it was not backed. The United States government at this time was borrowing more money than they can pay. So they figured, okay, we got this debt, we'll just print more money.
So if states were all printing their own money and they had different currency, were they able to do an exchange when you went to another state?
Yeah, there was so much money out there that was worthless. Each state would print their own money, but maybe in South Carolina they would accept South Carolina currency, but maybe not in Georgia or North Carolina. They wanted hard cash, either silver or gold. So it wasn't accepted in other states. It might only be accepted in South Carolina, but still, it was worthless. It was worthless. You had all this money out there, and it was totally worthless. I mean, the only good thing about it is you could take it to the outhouse with you. That's the only thing. Matter of fact, that would be a problem too, because the ink would probably go off. So there was a high inflation. So what does this do? Higher taxes, along with the refusal of creditors to accept paper money. A lot of farms now go into foreclosure. Farmers could not pay their debts, especially in Massachusetts. Daniel Shea, who was a captain during the American Revolution and a farmer, had fallen on hard times. He gets about 2,000 men together, and they have a campaign, and they shut down all the county courthouses. And again, just like if you go back to the Bacon's Rebellion, what they do is they start burning the courthouses because that's where the deeds were kept. They also then marched on to Springfield, the site of the arsenal. Well, Massachusetts has no choice but to call out the militia, and they put down Shea's rebellion. Well, what came out of this? Don't forget, up until this time, if they foreclosed on you, they could take everything you own, even the clothes off your back was subject to the foreclosure. Well, what comes out of this is new laws because of Shays' Rebellion. And this caused the Massachusetts legislature to reduce taxes and exempt personal items such as household goods and tools from seizure and foreclosure. So, the laws changed. But this was put down. Now, this was basically on a state level. George Washington is going to be confronted with another rebellion while he is president, which we'll see in coming books. All right, so we're going to move on to, so that we just see, we're up to number 15, number 15 on your worksheet. All right, let me pull out sections, my next section, because we're going, next section, we're going to write a constitution. A constitution. And if you notice, it says, challenge for a new nation, drafting a constitution. Going to go beyond the Articles of Confederation. Drafting a constitution. All right. We just looked at the Articles of Confederation. We saw what the Articles of Confederation do, and we saw what the Articles of Confederation cannot do. Again, the biggest thing is that they could not tax and they could not protect citizens out in the new frontier against Native Americans. So a combination of factors, again, underscored the need for a strong national government. Strong national government than the Articles of Confederation could provide for. They need something strong. Well, excuse me. Also, American manufacturing wanted a stronger government too, because they wanted this government to enter into negotiations with foreign powers. They had no power to impose high tariffs on goods coming into the United States. There was nothing in there that would protect domestic manufacturing from foreign goods, so a foreign competition. So they wanted this new government to protect them as far as business interests are concerned. Again, settlers in the West demanded a more aggressive policy of land concession and that more be done to protect them from the Native Americans. And three, merchants were looking for a government that could negotiate favorable international trade agreements with foreign nations. Maybe the Italian states, maybe Spain and Portugal. So this was a combination here of things that that the United States, or the people of the United States and businesses and everything, wanted this new government to do. All right, so you're going to, I'm sorry, I should have put this up. Keep on forgetting. See, there it is. Congress had no power to impose high tariffs to protect domestic industry. Settlers in the West demanded more protection from the Native Americans, and merchants were looking for, looking for a government that could negotiate favorable international trade agreements, and they're looking for a government to negotiate for free navigation of the Mississippi River and to resolve their dispute with Spain. Don't forget, after the French and Indian War, Spain got the Louisiana territory. and they set up a blockade on the Mississippi. We're going to look at, because that becomes a problem for George Washington. And it's going to lead us into the Whiskey Rebellion. So, in order to deal with these problems, the Confederation Congress then called for a constitutional convention. So in May of 1787, 55 delegates from 12 of the 13 states, again, Rhode Island's missing, and nobody cared. Rhode Island's missing, met in Philadelphia. So now you have 55 delegates meeting in Philadelphia. Among them were George Washington, and George Washington is chosen as the chairman of the Constitutional Convention. He's in charge. He's got the gavel. He's going to use it when necessary. Well, at this Constitutional Convention were Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton. Now, as a group, the delegates were men in their 30s and 40s. They were young men, relatively young men. Most were lawyers, and most had served in the Second Continental Congress and the Confederation Congress. So these were seasoned veterans. Although the states proposal of the convention was to revise the Articles of Confederation. Notice they met because the Articles of Confederation were too weak, so they want to revise them, maybe give them a little more backbone. But after thinking about it, they say, you know, let's ditch the Articles of Confederation and let's come up with a new constitution. Develop a new structure of government. All right. So they now say, they all agree. It says, okay, we're going to now try to form a new government. These are brilliant men. These are brilliant men. It's a shame they're not around today. I guess they would be crying right now, see what's happening to this country. But they come up and they're going to draft a whole new constitution. So they come up with two plans. The Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. And believe me, it's hard to realize that New Jersey ever had a plan. But there it is, New Jersey plan. So they come up with these two plans. Well, the early constitutional debate focused on a proposal submitted by James Madison, which becomes known as the Virginia Plan or Large State Plan. Let's look at his first, okay? Because the New Jersey Plan is submitted by Patterson, and it's also referred to as the Small State Plan. So they gotta look at these two plans, one for the large states, one for the small states. The Virginia Plan called for a two-house legislature. Two-house legislature. And what this Congress can do, it's empowered to make laws and levy taxes, with the representation in both houses based on population. So we're going to say, if represented in both houses based on population. So say, for example, for every 1,000 people living in your state, you get one representative. So you have 2,000 people, you get two representatives. Right? This is what this says. Representation based on population. All right. Fine. Representative government. Members of the lower house would be elected by voters in each state. So, if you have the lower house, You're elected. You're elected by the people. By the people. Now, this steps to a representative government. The people are going to vote for the lower house. Now, the upper house would be chosen by the lower house from candidates nominated by the state legislature. So you have the state legislature, and then you have the upper, they would nominate people from the lower house to serve in the upper house. Okay? So the upper house is not proportional to population. It's people from the lower house who would then be would go to the upper house. The plan had no provisions for electing an executive president. The president would be chosen by the national legislature to serve for one term and was responsible for executing the laws. So, the president would be elected by the national legislature, not by the people. The legislature would also appoint judges to one or more Supreme Courts and lower national courts. So, they would also elect judges.
Wait, who would appoint the judges? The state legislators? Is that correct?
What?
When you said they would appoint judges, the president would appoint judges or the state legislature?
No. The president had very little power. You got to remember that they did not trust one person to have so much power.
Okay.
The legislature, the upper and lower house would appoint the judges,
Okay.
not the president.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarification.
The president's duty was only to see that laws be executed and occasionally kiss babies and give out cigars, whatever else they wanted him to do. So the legislature would appoint judges. Now, opposition to Madison's proposal developed immediately. So James Madison goes up there and says, okay, this is what we're proposing. This is the Virginia plan, the large state plan. This is what we're proposing. As soon as he proposes it, boom, opposition. Opposition comes from William Paterson of New Jersey. Now, he notes that the large state plan would give considerable power to states like Virginia and New York because they are the most populated states. So you can get Virginia and New York and possibly Pennsylvania, and they could control this Congress. They can control everything. They get together, they can do whatever they want because they would have the most delegates. They would have the most delegates. So William Paterson says, no, this is not fair. You're going to have more delegates than we, and you could rule Congress. So what he comes up with, and he says that the members were chosen by the state legislatures, and each state was given one vote. So he says, okay, Congress, this would be Paterson. So he says, okay, what he proposes was because New Jersey is such a small state that each state have one vote. One vote, one state. I think I did that backwards. One state, one vote. Yeah, I did it backwards. One state, one vote. So it doesn't matter how many people you send to Congress. It's not based on population, but New Jersey would have one vote, Virginia would have one vote, New York would have one vote, Maryland would have one vote, they would all have one vote. One state, one vote. He also he also proposes that a multi-person executive elected by the legislatures were proposed. So what they're saying is that they're going to create a executive, but it's going to be kind of like a committee. It's going to be more than one executive. And again, I emphasize this point: they feared a person with given a person so much power, like a president, because they think, well, we fought a way out from underneath one person who had so much power, so we're not going to give that power to somebody else. But they almost give it to George Washington. The executive, who was removable by action of the majority of governors, also appointed judges to the Supreme Court. So the governors could get rid of these executives. Law passed by the legislature were binding on the states, and a multi-person executive was authorized to compel obedience to laws. So they're saying, yeah, well, we have this executives, and their only duty was to make sure that the laws are carried out. That's all. That's all they want. All right. So now, what are they going to do? You got these two plans, and they're fighting. So they said, okay, you got to come into a compromise, and it's called the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise. The New Jersey plan was rejected. I wonder why. They should have sent Tony Soprano down to Philadelphia. Maybe they would have accepted it. But the New Jersey plan is rejected. But the proposal of a representative in Congress continued to divide the Constitutional Convention. They're going back on that. How are you going to count the people, or how are you going to elect someone? So that this business of representation by population still is hanging around. James Monroe's or Madison's. Congress continued to divide over this problem. The large states wanted proportional representation based on population, and the small states demanded equal representation, one state, one vote. Okay? Large states wanted to govern by population. And the smaller states wanted voting by one state, one vote. Right? So they have to come to a compromise. And again, this is these people knew how to compromise, and they knew how to compromise. And this was the basis, and this was what's so great about the American political system, is that they could compromise. And this is what's not happening today. These two parties cannot compromise. They all want to be kings of the playground. And this is what the problem is today. They just cannot compromise. And compromising is a hallmark of our government. That the two parties had to come together and they compromise. Well, they don't do that anymore. They don't do that anymore. So that becomes a problem. All right. So what they do is they have this solution to the dilemma, and it's called the Great Compromise. Now, let's take a look at the Great Compromise. The number of seats in the House of Representatives, which would be the lower house, representatives would be proportional to each state's population, and each representative be elected by the people. So again, we go back to this formula. 1,000 people, 1 delegate. 2,000 people, 2 delegates. Elected by the people. Lower house. All right, now they have to balance this. They have to balance this. So they said, okay, we're going to create a Senate. And each state would have 2 independently voting senators to be chosen by the state legislatures. All right, so the upper house now would be chosen by the state legislatures, but each state would have 2 votes. And the way the Constitution, if you look at the articles of the Constitution, what they're saying is that if, I don't know if it goes this high, but say the House of Representatives puts a bill in, and it's called H210. So they vote on it. They vote on it. This is the way the government is set up today. So they pass it. Now they send it to the Senate. So the Senate 210. So the Senate then votes on it. Now, I'm going to go over this again when we look at the structure of the Constitution. But the Senate votes on it. Now, when the Senate votes on it, and now this could be vice versa. It could start off as Senate 210 and then go to the House as H210, or it can go this way. Doesn't matter. But if both houses pass it, it goes to the president, who can either sign it into law or veto it. There's another thing that the president can do. He can pocket veto it, which means he doesn't really veto it, but all he does is take it, put it in his desk. Doesn't sign it, doesn't veto it, doesn't do anything. So it's called a pocket veto. And now I'll go over this again because there's a lot of things that involve here. Because the law, if the president doesn't sign the law into law, well, it goes back to the Senate, and we'll see how that works later on. All right. So now you have a lower house elected by the people. You have the upper house, which is a position that's appointed by each state legislature. This doesn't change. I think it's all the early 1900s, where it becomes an amendment. I can't remember what amendment it was. I think it could be in the early 1800s. I think it's the 12th Amendment. But we're going to go over each one of these amendments as we progress. All right. So now they have Congress set up. They have the legislature set up. What's the next problem? How do you count? I'm going to go over the next problem. I can't go over it on Monday because you're taking a test, and we'll go over the next problem on Wednesday. Next Friday, I'm behind in my extra credit, so next Friday will be another extra credit thing. If you want to do it or not, it'll be worth 7 points, and it's going to be on the Declaration of Independence, which I should have already showed you, but remote is kind of I'm out of rhythm. I'm out of rhythm mode with remote. So we set up the legislature. We have the legislature all set up, and this is basically the way Congress acts today, except that the upper house today is elected by the people. So is the lower house. In fact, I don't think there's any senators that are up for election. Not in this state, anyway. Senator is in office for 7 years. Lower house, they're in office for 2 years. So if you want something done, go to your representative. He'll do something for you quicker than the senator because a senator doesn't have to worry about being elected until 7 years, or this guy every 2 years. All right, so I'm going to sign you up here, and the test, I'll be here. Yes.
Could you post the presentation to Canvas as well?
What, this PowerPoint?
Mm-hmm. It's not on Canvas.
Right, it's in Canvas under File.
It's not on Canvas. I checked.
Oh,
There's-
it's
there's two-
definitely. it's
There's two
definitely-
copies of the modulars, but the presentation's not there.
You should have two other things. You should have at least 5 things there, right?
We have the 3 modulars.
But you're gonna have the last one of the, I don't know what the sequence is, but you have to scroll down.
I did, Professor. It's not there.
I don't know, then you're the only one who doesn't have it, really.
No, I don't have it. It's under.
There's a document. There's a document that looks like the presentation, but it's just another version of the modules. It's not the exact presentation. It's just another version of it.
Well, just email me, I'll download the whole thing. So just email me on it, and I'll send it to you. That's how.
I had actually, I too emailed you for it, but you told me that I had it. I mean, do any of the others, do you guys have it? Because I'm looking at it and it shows the last file uploaded was September.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there, but if for some reason you don't have it, email me and I can send it to you.
Or can you just email them maybe to the whole, just attach it in an email to the whole class?
Well, no, it's already in file. I've sent it, it seems like, you know.
So can we get, like, we have
The whole class doesn't have it.
Can
we
somebody
checked
else
with
speak
them.
up? Yeah. Nobody has it. We need somebody else to speak to it, though.
Well,
Denise says she doesn't have it either.
are you, let me see what it is.
Or can you share, maybe you can share your screen, Professor, and show us where you think you loaded it.
Yeah, that's what,
Yeah. I mean, you know, we know it's all new, but we don't have it.
yeah, I can send it to everybody. That's it. I can't send it to everybody. I can only send it to individuals, because when I go to websites, I can't add any, give it to you, but, I'm so sure it's there, but I will check, just let me know who you are. You want it, and we'll check and see why. And then I will address it for you. Okay, I gotta sign you off because I got to start the next one. So if you have any concerns, you can, email me.
All right, there's other people in our group chat that they don't have it either. So maybe you can ask, like maybe you can ask the IT support that you have.
Section 7, okay. All right, just email me who you are. I will, matter of fact, they can check it. That's 10. Okay,
Thank you.
have a nice weekend.
Have a good weekend. Bye.